Mary was making a statement about her commitment to Jesus. When she broke the flask, there was no going back. The entire contents of that vessel would have been used, or were used, and there was no way to take it back. It's either open or it's shut. Her commitment to him was unconditional and complete. Point number 2, she was making a statement about his value to her. She was telling Jesus, you mean more to me than anything in the world. And number 3, she was making a statement about her value to herself. By this act, Mary was demonstrating that Jesus meant more to her than her own reputation. You see, that right there really strikes at the heart of all of us, because all of us deal with pride. And from time to time, sometimes it's not so much, and other times it rears its ugly head, and it demonstrates itself in various ways. I have a house full of 3 kids, and I include myself as one of them. My youngest son, Luke, he is a blessing, and he's a challenge. And if he were here today, I'd say that right to him. I'd say it right to him, because he knows. We have an understanding. But God placed these children in my life in a certain order, and he placed them in that order for a certain reason, and that was to change me. Jonathan was a compliant child. Jonathan's smart. I don't have to spend hours with him working on homework. He's just smarter than I am. Basically, that's what it comes down to. When it comes down to math and a lot of the things that he's studying at school, he's surpassed me. And I'm okay with that. I really am. I'm proud of it. In a good way. But Luke is a challenge too, because Luke doesn't accept anything on its face value. If I tell him, it's black, he's going to say it's white. And if I tell him no, he's going to say, well, can I ask you again? Because I might get a different answer the next time. It's just that kind of thing. And I guess what I'm getting to is that God shapes us in various ways. And what he has done through, my children is he's begun to polish off the prideful edges in my life. Because I grew up believing that when the dad says jump, you just ask how high can I jump. Because that's kind of the way my dad taught me. And, God says, look, I have a different plan for your life, and I'm going to teach you through your children. And I'm going to polish off a lot of that pride from your life. And that's just one example. There are many, many examples. And you have them too. You reflect on that in your own life. And there's pride in your life, maybe between you and your spouse at times. You want it one way, and he or she wants it a different way. You think you should discipline your kids this way, and they think they should be done this way. And on it goes. So, I guess what I'm saying is that she sacrificed her pride in order to serve him. She was saying, I love you so much that I do not care what anyone thinks about my expression of extravagant love. And she did 2 things to prove this. Now, you have to understand the culture at the time to really appreciate this. Mary did 2 things that really stand out. She let her hair down. Now, why is that significant? Well, going through these passages and studying it from a historical viewpoint, it said that only prostitutes were seen in public with their hair down. So at that moment, she didn't care what anyone thought of her, and she merely wanted to express her extravagant love to Jesus, her Lord. And number 2, only slaves washed the feet of others. When a person came to your home, you offered the water so that they could wash their own feet. Or if you had slaves, you had them wash the feet of those who came to visit. Mary took the place of a slave before the Lord. She humbled herself before him, and she served him because she loved him. So she put herself in a position of subservience to demonstrate that extravagant love to Jesus. That may be what's required of us. We put ourselves in a subservient position in order to serve someone else. That won't always be an easy thing to do. In fact, you may be challenged on a regular basis because we all deal with pride in our hearts. She was making a statement about the value, and this is the fourth point. She was making the statement about the value of her possessions. To Mary, nothing in the world was as valuable to her as Jesus. She loved him with an extravagant love, and everything she possessed was his anyway. Now that phrase, everything that she possessed was his anyway, immediately reminds me of giving. Specifically financially. Oh man, that is an area that I struggle with. And I don't know why. But I think part of it has to do with the way I was raised. My dad taught me to save. It's so important, and it is important. And here is God's word, and this message telling us that, well, number one, the church can't thrive unless we're willing to give financially to meet the needs of those around us. So it gets immediately to what is it that I treasure. I treasure money so much that I want to hoard it all for myself. Wait a minute, God owns everything that I have. And see, that's a mindset change. It's a paradigm shift. I like that phrase. It's a paradigm shift because what it means is that typically we, out of our own nature, without being transformed by Jesus, want to keep everything for ourselves. That's getting into our fleshly nature. Jesus doesn't want that. And in fact, the church can't exist if the members of the body aren't willing to give and aren't willing to, and I don't just mean financially, I mean in other ways too. But this one really stood out to me. God owns everything that I have, whether I believe it or not. He does. And so if I believe it, it helps me take me to that next step where I'm willing to give of my time and my money. Something else that stood out to me about this passage was she was making a statement about his worthiness to be worshipped and served. She did it because she was thankful. And she was thankful for two things. She was thankful for who he was, her Redeemer. He was the promised Messiah, and she believed it. And that's what she was thankful for. But if you look at this passage and begin to tie all the loose ends together, then what you see is relationships beginning to form between the people that are in this setting. You've got Mary and Martha, who are sisters. And then there's this other character, Lazarus, who's reclining at the table, their brother. And you've got Jesus, and then you've got Judas. What had just happened before this setting occurred? Well, Lazarus was raised from the dead. So Mary has another reason to be extremely thankful for who Jesus is and what he did for her. Not only spiritually, but physically, raising her brother from the dead. So that statement that Mary demonstrated that Jesus was worthy to be worshipped and served is true because of these connections that we see in these verses. And on top of that, Mary believed that Jesus was going to die. And I mentioned this earlier. on a cross. In verse 8, she believed a truth that the disciples could not yet grasp. As far as she knew, this would be the last time that she would have to serve him and to honor him. And she seized the moment. She seized the opportunity and made it count for the glory of God. So let's begin to make some applications now at this point. How does this verse, this passage, apply to our lives? So I want to just read some questions to you, because these are the kinds of questions that will make you think, where do I stand on this? Number one, when was the last time you offered the Lord an offering of extravagant love? Now, I'm not asking the last time you saw it. I'm asking you the last time you did it. When was the last time you broke the bank worshiping him? Do you know what I mean? I mean, you just went all out. And you didn't care what anybody else thought. I'm going to go do this thing. I don't care what anybody else says or thinks. It just doesn't matter, because God is compelling me to do something, and I have to go do it. That's what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. When was the last time you threw away your pride and gave him worship, honor, and praise? Maybe this morning. How long has it been since you placed everything you have, everything you are, and everything you care about on the altar of sacrifice before him and said, God, everything that I am is yours. From this day forward, from this moment forward. And when I continue to take it back, you take it back from me. Because God, you can do that. And I want that. Sure, my flesh doesn't want it, but I want that. I want that because it's right. And then what about today? I mean today, literally, Sunday. What will you do today that will be extravagant? You don't have to wait 24 hours. You don't have to wait an hour. You can bless somebody this morning before you leave this building. Motivated out of extravagant love. You know, I think about it myself, and maybe your experience is slightly different than mine, but I don't really see a lot of extravagant examples of love. I do see them, but I would love to see a lot more of them. I think this body would flourish if we were to do that, if we were to live that way. And I think the body of Jesus Christ, the worldwide, would flourish if others were to give. I remember a movie called Pay It Forward. I think you guys have probably seen or heard of it at least, where you just automatically do something for somebody else. And then that person turns around and does something for somebody else. And then there's no concern about credit or who did it or why. Wow. You know, if we did that, if we paid it forward in terms of giving extravagantly, giving out of the things that God has blessed us with, what a sweet aroma this body would give off to those around and to each other as well. So here's some things to challenge you with. There are very few who are willing to serve him with no thought of anything in return. And one of the things that you have to think about is it even possible? And I say that it is. It is possible to serve God with no thought of anything in return. If you get anything in return, and you probably will, it would be the knowledge of knowing that God was given the glory because you were motivated out of love. A couple more questions for you. Is Jesus more valuable to you than the things that you possess? Your job, your money, your house, your car. All of those are things. But is he more valuable to you than those things? Is he worth more to you than your pride? Are you totally committed to Jesus in extravagant love and worship?